Not yet confirmed, Egypt interim leader office says Mohamed El Baradei has not been named prime minister. We will bring you the latest on Egypt's transition. And Kismayo dilemma, aid agencies work affected as thousands flee the Somali port city of Kismayo fighting. It is 1 p.m. here in East Africa, noon in Cairo. You tuned in to Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Penny Nakaribe. Also coming up.
In most areas in our region, when you terrace, you can create more problems, especially those areas that are vulnerable to movements.
Residents return to unstable grounds of Mount Elgon in Uganda and advised to plant more trees. And France beats Uzbekistan 4-0 to set up Under-20 World Cup semi-final against Ghana or Chile. We begin in Egypt, where a report that Nobel Peace Prize winner Mohamed El Baradei had been named as Egypt's interim prime minister was dismissed by the Egyptian presidency spokesperson on Saturday. Ahmed Musalamani said discussions were ongoing and that reconciliation was crucial as the country remains deeply divided over the ousting of Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohamed Morsi by the Egyptian army. The country's interim president Adli Mansour is expected to name his new prime minister within the next couple of days, while the political crisis continues to spark protests and violence nationwide.
The president met with some political figures. Dr. Baradei was one of them, but discussions are ongoing. We will resist any blackmailing or pressure. The choice will be based on professionalism because we're looking for a government that is capable of overcoming the current crisis. The president's vision of the new state is that it will have space for everyone from all political factions.
The oust of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi by the military following a week of mass protest has brought the struggle between the Muslim Brotherhood and the army to the fore. The Muslim Brotherhood continues to stage protests and attack military checkpoints in defiance of the toppling of Morsi, while a number of its leaders have been arrested. This raises questions over whether the Brotherhood will be pushed into operating underground again. Asar Hakim takes a look at the forced relations and history between the army generals and the Brotherhood.
The power struggle between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood dates back to the late 1950s, when former President Gamal Abdel Nasser clamped down on the group after an assassination attempt on him for refusing to establish the Sharia law. Working underground for the next 60 years, the Muslim Brotherhood attracted thousands of Egyptians and increased their base through Islamic preachings and political struggle.
They targeted the poor and desperate, offering them food, money and work, while posing as religious, pious people who represent God and Islamic ethics, a formula that worked brilliantly in Egypt and most Islamic countries. The Brotherhood became an underground international institution.
The 25th of January revolution was the golden opportunity for the Muslim Brotherhood to surface and become a recognized group. They quickly formed a political party, the Freedom and Justice Party, and were ready to compete in the political game, ironically with the help of the army. Under the military's CAF supervision, all elections and ballots were won by the FJP. They achieved a majority in both parliaments and narrowly won the presidential elections. One of the first decisions by the democratically elected President Mohamed Morsi was to sack the military's top brass.
In only 1 year, the Muslim Brotherhood moved from an illegal underground group into the undisputed rulers of the country. And their leader, Mohamed Morsi, became the higher commander of the armed forces. It was like a fairy tale into the making.
But the fairy tale lasted only 1 year. A series of political mistakes and economic deterioration led to public outrage, which was translated into mass protests in the streets. The military was back in the limelight. Minister of Defense Al-Sisi, who was appointed by Morsi, deposed the president and installed the chief of the Supreme Constitutional Court as interim president to oversee the transitional period.
The history is repeating itself. Just like in the 50s, the army is arresting Muslim Brotherhood leaders for inciting violence and killings, and even Morsi himself is under military custody. We now expect jihadists to escalate terrorist operations against the army in support of the Brotherhood.
The group is now fighting back with mass protests and attacks on military checkpoints, opening a new chapter in the power struggle between the generals and the Brotherhood. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Egyptian women have played a major role in the public demonstrations that continue against deposed President Mohamed Morsi's alleged mishandling of the economy and attempts to draft an Islamist constitution. CCTV's Jack Barton is in Cairo, where he reports that Egyptian women are continuing to turn out in large numbers despite what seems to have become endemic sexual harassment and violence against them.
We're in Tahrir Square, which has been the epicenter of protests in Egypt ever since discontent first burst out on the streets, leading to the ousting of long-time strongman Hosni Mubarak and in the past few days the democratically elected president Mohamed Morsi. Now, throughout all of these protests, women have played a leading role, who allege that Morsi was driving an Islamist agenda and also mishandling the economy.
We need President have all Egyptian, not have brotherhood only.
We have no Muslim brothers now. Egypt now come back again to all Egyptians, not only for Muslims. We like Egypt like this.
We are very happy because Morsi has gone.
Our camerawoman Catalina had to conduct those interviews because I can't go beyond a green rope that's just beyond those men there. It's been put there to protect the women after about 170 sexual assaults and rapes since these protests began. But at least now in the daytime, the women say this security, along with marshals, is having an effect.
Here, there is no violence against women here. We are, as you see, we are free. There is a peace between us. We are not afraid of anything.
But it's a different story after dark, when thousands of people cram into these streets leading up to Tahrir Square, which you can see in the distance behind me. And the limited security can do very little to stem what is being described as an endemic level of sexual violence. Supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood have even begun retweeting reports of the assaults in an attempt to discredit the protesters here, and it points to a larger problem. A UN survey of hundreds of Egyptian women revealed that more than 99% of them had experienced harassment, assault, or rape. So the one thing that all Egyptian women are united on right now, regardless of the political divisions, is that the sexual violence must stop. Jack Barton, CCTV, Cairo.
Let's now get the latest developments from Egypt. CCTV's Yasser Hakim joins us live from Cairo. Yasser, a lot of speculation surrounding the upcoming appointment of Egypt's interim prime minister. Are we any closer to knowing who it might be?
No, the spokesman for the president did not make it any clearer for anyone who will be the next prime minister. Probably the interim president himself doesn't know yet. He's been trying to gather the different political forces to try to get some kind of consensus on who will be the prime minister who all would agree on. There's Mohamed al-Baradei, the Nobel laureate, peace laureate, and an opposition figure in Egypt, and he's backed by the liberals, the National Salvation Front, and the youth, the group that has orchestrated these demonstrations that ousted the president. They want Mohamed al-Baradei to be there. They say he's an international, respectable figure who can attract attention of the world towards Egypt and help get aid for Egypt from around the world. On the other hand, the Islamists and some other forces, they say Egypt needs an economic expert at this point. Egypt has a lot of economic problems, and the prime minister should be someone who has experience in the economic side of the story. And they have put the name of Kamal Ganzouri. He's a former prime minister who previously had some success in the economic file in Egypt. Who will be the next prime minister is yet to be seen.
Yeah, right. Yes, let's turn to the violence that's been ongoing. What next steps will the interim president, Adli Mansour, be taking to appease both sides and forge a way out of this crisis?
The Muslim Brotherhood and some of the Islamist militants and sects are trying to create chaos and put pressure on the interim president and the Minister of Defense so that they can heed to their demands and reinstate Mohamed Morsi as president. Now the military said it will not happen. They will not return back to square one, and that the only way out of this crisis is through reconciliation. And they have decided to organize a committee it's a called Reconciliation Committee, in which the Salafists have agreed to take part in, and the Salafists have decided that they will be the mediator between the liberals and the Muslim Brotherhood, or the ones who ousted the Muslim Brotherhood and the new leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, to try to get them together and forge some kind of agreement, but not with the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood. Most of them are now either wanted or arrested for inciting violence. Now they're targeting the youth, the Muslim Brotherhood youth, telling them you should look to the future with a new perspective, different from the old guards of the Muslim Brotherhood who seem to be cracked down now and clamped down by the military, and the military is trying to side them away and put the youth in the forefront of the equation, the new political equation in Egypt.
All right, Yasser, thanks very much for joining us. Yasser Hakim live there in Cairo. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a break. Coming up. Kismayo dilemma. Aid agencies work affected as thousands flee the Somali port city of Kismayo fighting.
We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need a trade justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life. We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world.
Welcome back. The World Health Organization says fighting in the southern Somali city of Kismayo is taking its toll on the civilian population and impacting adversely on humanitarian aid work in the region. This in the wake of a leaked protest letter from the Somali Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the African Union, seemingly accusing the AMISOM peacekeeping force of complicity in the Kismayo conflict. CCTV's Mohammed Hirmoge has the latest from Somalia.
Government soldiers and civilians injured in the recent Kismayo fighting received treatment at the Medina Hospital in Mogadishu. At least 71 people have been killed and more than 300 wounded in sporadic fighting between rival militias in the disputed port city of Kismayo. The United Nations Security Council has since called for intervention to end hostilities in southern Somalia.
Members of the Security Council expressed their concern at the deterioration in the security situation in the Juba regions, particularly in Kismayo, and at the resulting impact on the civilian population and the humanitarian situation. The members of the Security Council called on all parties to refrain from any action which may threaten peace and stability in the Juba regions.
The city had witnessed 3 days of intense fighting last week between rival factions that led to massive displacement. The World Health Organization says the Kismayo infighting impedes humanitarian work in the region. The United Nations Special Envoy had earlier called for dialogue between rival factions in the region.
It is time that those who are leading in this country and those who are playing a leading role in Kismayo decide to choose peace, decide to discuss their differences and their legitimate differences at the table. They should exchange ideas and views and not exchange gunfire.
As tensions escalate, the Somali government is now asking the African Union for the deployment of a multinational force to replace the Kenyan troops in the port city. The Kenyan troops who moved into Somalia 2 years ago, following a spate of Al-Shabaab incursions and abductions in Kenyan territory, successfully drove out the militia group from huge swathes of territory in southern Somalia, managing to liberate the port city of Kismayo. Apparently, they have now turned into villains. Neither the African Union, the AMISOM command in Mogadishu, and the Kenyan government have responded to the accusations by the government in Mogadishu. Kismayo has become the scene of sporadic and at times intense battles as rival factions fight over the control of the port city. The central government in Mogadishu has since disowned any administration of the disputed port city and is now accusing AMISOM's peacekeeping forces over there to have lost neutrality. Mohamed Hirmogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.
Over a year after landslides swept away 2 villages in the Mount Elgon region in eastern Uganda, killing 18 people, some survivors are still living on a dangerous ground in the mountain despite calls from environmentalists to vacate the area. Environmentalists say the Mount Elgon region is a water catchment area meant for planting trees and not farming. The texture of the soil there is very soft, meaning it is easily washed away during heavy downpours. CCTV's Isabel Nakiria with the details.
This time last year, Kulusum Wasembe narrowly escaped being buried beneath this mound of earth, which is now being farmed on. The 27-year-old mother of 5 was alerted by the noise of the landslide, coupled with screams from other villagers, and managed to escape with her children.
When I came out of the kitchen, I saw earth coming down. I quickly gathered the children and ran down the hill, but when I reached there, I collapsed and was rushed to hospital.
Her family home used to be at this spot, now buried. It has since been turned into farmland despite warnings from environment experts that it's risky to plow here. Just few meters away is a newly built family house. The land on which it is built was donated by friends, though it's still not far from danger if another landslide were to take place.
We came back here to dig because of hunger, but we are still scared. Another landslide could occur and find us here, but we cannot sit back because there's nowhere else to dig.
Environmentalists say the soil around the Mount Elgon region is too soft and can't withstand heavy rainfall and is therefore not recommended for plowing or building upon.
Most areas in our region, when you terrace, you can create more problems, especially those areas that are vulnerable to movements.
Mount Elgon consists of several river tributaries which flow down the mountainside. It's a water catchment area and forest reserve, but locals have encroached on it, weakening the soil despite warnings of fresh cracks. Environmentalists say heavy and sometimes unseasonal rains coupled with deforestation and poor farming practices have increased the incidences of landslides on the slopes. They recommend the only way forward is to plant more trees, which would help hold back the soil. But some of these people, like 70-year-old Jamila Nabulwala, whose house only just missed being swept away in the last landslide, said she has nowhere else to go. The Ugandan government has so far relocated some people to safer ground, but not all. The Mount Elgon region has been hit by several landslides, the latest in 2012 that left 18 people dead and several displaced. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Mount Elgon region, Eastern Uganda.
The Great Wildebeest Migration is one of the 7 new wonders of the world. Nowhere in the world is there a movement of animals as immense as the wildebeest migration. Hundreds of tourists throng the Masai Mara National Reserve to witness the Great Wildebeest Migration. Trevor Umbeja reports.
Every year, from July to October, about 2 million wildebeests, zebras and antelopes hybrid organize themselves into groups and start migrating from Tanzania's Serengeti National Park, thousands of kilometers away, to the greener pastures of the Masai Mara National Reserve in Kenya. They have to cross the Mara River, which is infested by crocodiles. This is one of the highlights as the animals struggle to cross the river alive. In the Masai Mara plains, they will be hunted, stalked and run down by larger carnivores. The Masai Mara has one of the largest lion population in the world. This spectacular event, however, begins in January through to February. where the wildebeests give birth in a synchronized pattern. During this period, about 300 to 400,000 calves are born within 2 to 3 weeks of one another. The annual period of birthing provides a feast for predators. Driving across the plains, one can literally count hundreds of hyenas and dozens of lions hovering about. It may seem that the wildebeests are doing the predators a favor by giving birth all at the same time, but the predators have a limited impact on the population of newborn calves. Any calves born outside the peak time are far more likely to perish. There is no better time to visit the Mara than during the Great Migration. The sound of the approaching herd is a deep, primal rumbling of thundering hooves and low grunts. The sight of the wildebeest is staggering, a continuous charging mass that stretches from one horizon to the other. This endless grey river of life is mottled with black and white as zebras join in the march. Trevor Ombija, CCTV.